Hey everyone, this is Amber Key, and you're listening to a Bright Idea podcast, a show where I sit down with entrepreneurs to discuss the aha moments that launched their businesses. On today's show, I'm joined by Octavia Carson, an attorney, advocate, and the founder of the Black Bar Applicant Fund, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the increasing Black representation in the legal profession by helping aspiring lawyers overcome the financial barriers for bar admission. A first-generation attorney and valedictorian of Thomas Jefferson School of Law, Octavia created the fund after witnessing firsthand how systemic inequities and economic hardship prevent many talented Black graduates from becoming licensed attorneys. Through her leadership, the organization has provided critical financial and emotional support for bar applicants across the country, covering exam fees, living expenses, and mentorship during one of the most challenging phases of their legal journey. In addition to her nonprofit work, Octavia is the principal attorney at Carson Legal Strategies PLLC, where she helps creatives and entrepreneurs protect their brands through trademarks, contracts, and business formation. Her mission across all of her work is to create access, equity, and empowerment in spaces where Black professionals have historically been excluded. When she's not advocating for the next generation of Black attorneys, Octavia enjoys traveling, having visited over 40 countries, and uses her global experiences to inspire her approach to justice, creativity, and leadership. In this episode, we'll talk about her personal journey, why the bar exam is more than just a test, and how her nonprofit is changing lives one applicant at a time. Before we dive in, if you like what we're doing here at a Bright Idea podcast, help us keep going. You can subscribe to this show to get notifications when a new episode drops. If you like what you hear, share this episode with someone who needs a little inspiration. And if you would like to support the show directly, you can donate to our Cash App at a Bright Idea podcast. Lastly, if you're a business owner or a brand looking to connect with our growing audience, we'd love to collaborate with you. You can sponsor an ad within one of our episodes or sponsor an entire episode. Just reach out to us to learn more. Now let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Octavia Carson, founder of the Black Bar Applicant Fund. All right, we have Octavia Carson here today from the Black Bar Applicant Fund. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm so excited to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, we talked a few weeks ago about your nonprofit. And for those of you that don't know, you actually reached out to me via Instagram and you were like, I'm disrupting the industry by, my nonprofit organization that helps, alleviate some of the financial barriers that applicants have when they are applying for the bar, among other things that you're doing within your organization, which I'm super excited to get into. And this was news to me as someone who's a journalist. I was actually surprised by the fact about how little I knew about this subject. And it's so timely today, especially with everything going on in the media politically. And so I'm going to stop talking and we're going to get into it. But before we get into it, I like to play a game called Rapid Fire where I get to know you a little bit. So if you would, I'm going to ask you some quick questions and we can just dive in.
Let's do it.
All right. So what would you say the single hardest part about preparing for the bar was for you?
It was the mental aspect, like telling myself I can do this. It's a lot of information, but I can pass. I can learn enough to pass. Yeah.
Love that. What's a common myth about the bar exam that you would like to be debunked?
The bar exam is not the original way for lawyers to become lawyers.
Wow.
It came after the Jim Crow era when they wanted to basically get rid of blacks and undesirable whites from the legal profession. So diploma privilege and other forms of pretty much like you've been able to show us your skills, now you can be an attorney. That used to be the standard. Yeah.
You spoke about it a little bit just now. You said diploma privilege. That actually leads me into my next question. What is diploma privilege? How would you describe that in one sentence?
Diploma privilege is being granted a license as an attorney based on graduating from law school.
And what is one policy as part of the bar exam that you would like to change? If you could change one thing today, what would that be?
Abolish it. Abolish the bar exam.
And
It
we're
just
going to get
doesn't
into
need to
that.
exist. Yeah.
So you are an attorney, you also have a nonprofit. Um you're a busy woman. I think before we got on this call, we were talking just about like life in general and all the curveballs and how you're still staying afloat with all of this hard work. Like, what is something that gives you hope?
Just seeing change happen in real time gives me hope. Just last week, Oregon, was it Oregon? No, it was Utah. They passed an alternative to the bar exam. So pretty much diploma privilege is the law of the land in Oregon or Utah. Sorry. I keep saying Oregon because Oregon also has it, but they did it back in 2021, 2022, around that time. So just watching states like one by one start to um, provide alternatives to the bar exam gives me so much hope. And to see, other people who I talk to about my work agree with the work and the fact that it's necessary, I feel so hopeful.
I love that. I want to get into a bit of your background before we get into your nonprofit and sort of the aha moment that launched this nonprofit. But what drew you to becoming a lawyer?
Um, I would say at first it was pretty superficial. I was an 8-year old, a spicy 8-year old that liked to argue with people, that was like interested in politics in a way that was not normal for a child. And people were just like, you know what, you should be a lawyer. And I was like, yeah, then I can get paid a lot of money to argue with people, which is not the reality of our job most of the time. But then I became more of a civic. I would say I became more engaged in volunteering and helping my community, civic engagement type things. And as I saw that people really needed assistance with just like the basic things, like finding food, finding a home, and as they were trying to establish themselves, they would get knocked back by like messy landlords or just like people who were trying to take advantage of them, like the rent center type places or the
Mm,
check cashing type places, and they had no way to fight because it's like finding a lawyer is unavailable. You ask another attorney if they can afford their own services, sometimes it's not even, they can't even afford their own services. So
yeah.
I wanted to be an attorney at that point because I wanted to help people and I wanted to be able to offer services to people who couldn't afford it.
You said that when you were an 8-year-old, you were a spicy 8-year-old that liked to argue, and that was like your entry into becoming a lawyer. But then you also mentioned that you were someone that was interested in politics. I find that so interesting at such a young age that you were interested. What areas in politics that like really drew you in as something you wanted to be a part of?
Well, my uncle at the time, he was on city council in Pontiac, Michigan, where I lived, and then my granddad would always go to city council meeting. So I thought it
Yeah,
was interesting that they were in charge of allocating money to our schools or city planning, things like that.
yeah.
So I was interested on a local level as far as my city was concerned because the people around me were involved.
Hmm.
But I also was interested in on the federal level, mostly because like the president was in, the media constantly. George Bush was president while I was growing up for most of the time. And so I was literally watching the news in that moment where he was in he was in a press briefing, I think in the Middle East somewhere. I don't want to get the country wrong, but someone threw a shoe at him. And a
Yeah.
lot of people have seen that recording later on, but I actually saw it when it was happening on the news because
Wow.
I had just constantly watched like um MSNBC and sometimes even Fox. I was like already noticing how partisan these two stations were. And I
Mm-hmm.
just thought it was so interesting to compare their school of thought and just to see people get riled up over what the president was doing. And oftentimes people wanted to challenge me as a young girl who was interested in becoming a leader and say, like, women shouldn't be leaders. We're too emotional, and I came back and debated them on that, why women would actually make great leaders
Yeah.
and how becoming too emotional isn't something that should be gendered. Like even a man can do that. You know what I
Right.
mean? So, yeah, as a kid, I think I was involved. I was really, really interested in that local level politics and then federally, just what was like exciting on the news at the time. And then debating with people about, whatever was pertinent at the time, but also why women deserve a space in leadership.
Where did you see yourself in the profession?
In the legal profession, I didn't really know. Like it's changed so much. There were times where I wanted to be a judge advocate general, which is an attorney in the military. I even joined the military to do that, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then there was a time that I wanted to work for the international court, which is located in Switzerland or something. I wanted to practice basically like uh, international law. And then I wanted to practice immigration and help stateless people, people who have no immigration status in any country. They're
Hmm.
just completely stateless. I wanted to help them establish citizenship. And it's crazy because I went to the military, tried to do that. It didn't work. But I did go into immigration and I worked for the Board of Immigration Appeals for 2 years. So I was able to write opinions for those judges at the appellate level. And I also externed for federal court judges. So I was able to work for the courts in the capacity that I wanted to growing up. I didn't
Yeah.
make it all the way to the international court, but I've just been knocking things off my list.
No, I love that. I want to get into your law degree. And you received your law degree from Thomas Jefferson School of Law in San Diego, California, back in 2020. That was in the height of the pandemic.
Mhm.
Um, you mentioned like sort of your matriculation through like uh being a child and being interested in law, being interested in politics. Then you get to law school, and I know that I mean I went to graduate school as well for a totally different subject, but you do have this idea of what you're going to be and what you're going to deliver to the world and deliver to the industry. But this was during the height of the pandemic. Talk to us a little bit about that law school experience and like what you sort of imagined your future would be back then before the world just came crashing down.
Yeah, so law school definitely radicalized me. It made me realize that Black people really like formed the Constitution as it is now. So I got into a lot of debates with my constitutional law professor, friendly debates. Um, I really enjoyed law school. I knew going into it um, that I would have to practice the Socratic method, which is when the professor just like randomly ask someone a question, right? And they put you on spot and you pretty much go back and forth with the professor. And that can be really nerve wracking because one, if you don't know your stuff, you could end up losing points that day. And two, socially, it's awkward. And then three, it's like, did you do your homework the night before or even the week before so that you know what you're talking about? So I knew going into law school it would be like that because I actually went to law camp when I was in high school. I was real nerdy. I was like,
Wait,
"Ma,
that's so funny.
I had a presentation for my parents about why they needed to pay for me to go to law camp."
No,
I did,
absolutely.
and they did not
Period.
pay for me to go to law camp. Instead, I so once they said, "No, we still can't afford it," I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna find a scholarship." And I found a scholarship to pay for my way to go to law camp. I went to Lipscomb University Law Camp in Tennessee, and they taught me about like the LSAT, the Socratic method, reading cases, all of that. And so I kind of knew what to expect. But yes, getting like finishing my law degree during 2020 definitely threw a wrench into things. Like I was expecting to graduate in May. I was valedictorian in my class. I was expecting to do my big speech during graduation, walk across the stage, have a huge party with all my family and friends, celebrating the first Black attorney in our family,
Yeah.
and a valedictorian at that. And then to buckle down and study for the bar exam and take the bar exam at the end of July. That none of that happened. None of it. Those are all the traditional ways of going about graduating from law school and preparing for the bar exam and taking the bar exam. Instead, I like had to plug away through some random online material that they put together at the last minute. I had to convince my school that that semester should be pass fail instead of with grades because it was all experimental.
Right.
Um, and then I tried to convince the state of California and that they should cancel the bar that year.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, I didn't have any, like, I hadn't have anything against the bar exam at that time. I believed it was necessary. I believed that all attorneys should take the bar exam back in 2020 when I was preparing to graduate. I just thought we had to take the bar exam. But then when the pandemic hit, it just didn't seem possible because you have to put thousands of people in one room and
Right.
in order to test, right? So that's why I made a petition to try to get the state of California to cancel the bar that year. I didn't know what else they could do, but I was like, that can't happen. I don't want to go into a petri dish, pretty
Right.
much. And then I found this movement called United for Diploma Privilege. And I didn't know we were doing the same thing at the same time. So I just joined with them. And now we had a nationwide movement full of currently barred attorneys, professors, deans, judges, law students, and recent graduates who were all on this mission to abolish the bar exam and get diploma privilege. And so while I was simultaneously studying for the bar and advocating for diploma privilege. So at
Mm-hmm.
that point, um, I'm writing letters to the high courts in each jurisdiction. They decide whether or not you'll have a bar exam. The
Okay.
board of law examiners decide how to do the bar exam, like the format and everything. And so we're writing to both the Board of Law Examiners and the high courts telling them this test cannot happen. One, because of COVID, and because we recently discovered through all of our research that the bar exam is racist. It is a piece of the Jim Crow era that is persisting till today. And so we were able to convince Washington, D.C. I was also registered to take the bar in Washington, D.C. and California simultaneously because they
Yeah.
were slated for different dates. So we convinced D.C. to grant diploma privilege. I have my license in D.C. based off of diploma privilege. We convinced Washington State, Utah, Oregon, and Louisiana to grant diploma privilege. And thousands of us got our law license without having to take the bar exam that year, well, between 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
California gave a probationary period where you could practice without taking the bar, but then they expect you to later on go and take the bar. And then they retroactively lowered the bar passage score, which was amazing. Thousands of people who took the exam years ago, I believe it went all the way back to 2018, were able to be licensed suddenly. They might not have
Mm.
even been registered for a 2020 exam. They
Mm-hmm.
might have just been hanging out thinking they would never become attorneys, even though they had graduated from law school. And because
Mm.
of our work, those thousands of people got the email that said, "Hey, we messed up. The score that you got is now within the passing score range, and so
Right.
you're an attorney. Congratulations."
I find that to be so interesting because there were two issues. So it was during the pandemic, so you probably felt ill prepared. Like all of a sudden, I remember being in school during that time and everything going online, and like teachers are making lesson plans super quick, and it just doesn't feel like anyone is prepared for anything. And then on the other side, you're mentioning that you and other attorneys and other organizations were finding through research that the bar exam was actually not built for everyone equally. So what sort of like how did you guys come to that conclusion through your research? What were some of the things that like stuck out that you were like, oh shoot, this is actually against us, fully against us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, great question. So there were law review journals that wrote about the racist history of the bar exam. There are books that write about the racist history of the bar exam, and other articles online talk
Mm-hmm.
about the racist history of the bar exam. But importantly, they quote like pieces of legislative notes, historical pieces of legislative notes coming all the way back from the early 1900s, where they explicitly said, we need to enact a bar exam in this state. In North Carolina, they said this, we need to enact a bar exam in North Carolina in order to rid the profession of blacks and undesirable whites. We found these notes that explicitly said the people who advocated for the bar exam wanted it because they didn't want black people and undesirable whites to join the profession.
Hmm.
One of my favorite books to learn about the history, I'm gonna just like plug it.
Please plug it. Yes, please.
It's called Best Men of the Bar. Um, this book gives the history of the American Bar Association and just plain words. It's not a civil rights book. It's not a book that's supposed to tell you that ABA is racist. Do everything you can to denounce it and change the system. This book is just history, as a matter of fact, right? However, there are portions of the book that explain how the ABA methodically implemented gatekeeping mechanisms. And one of the gatekeeping mechanisms was the bar exam. And so we have the history right in front of us. We have the words of the people who chose to be racist during that time and whose legacy continues until today. And all we have to do is act on it and get rid of the racism in the legal profession so that all of us have an equal opportunity to become attorneys, and so that people who look like us have the opportunity to be represented by someone who has a similar background and understanding of where they're from.
Yes.
And lastly, so that we can expand our profession, because to be honest, there's a drought. People can't afford lawyers because there's not enough of us, and we can rack up our fees. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Not only that, but like law schools can make it super expensive because it's just so exclusive.
Talk to us about, well, first of all, I want to take note of what you just mentioned. Um, do you find it ironic that you guys discovered this during the pandemic when everyone's at home and has time to sit and read and really understand, go into and kind of read in between the lines of the rules and the laws of the bar exam and how they systemically are like oppressing people within this system, but also um during this time we're having a bunch of civil unrest in this country. Do you find it ironic that you guys were able to find this and really like bring it to a head during this time?
Yeah, I think it was definitely ironic that we found it while there was civil unrest because, specifically for my nonprofit, I was able to piggyback off of Black Lives Matter and use the hashtag Black Lawyers Matter. That gained a lot of traction and attention and helped us fundraise a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
However, the part about COVID, with everybody being at home, it was the perfect recipe, right? Because
Yes.
not only were we reading, but the people who encountered us were reading too. And we had a lot of naysayers, a
Yeah.
lot of people who were just immediately like, no, what are you talking about? Abolish the bar exam. We need something to show that that people are competent enough to be lawyers. Um, and so even those people had the time to read and retract what they were saying. I had people who were so against my message of abolishing the bar exam, and then a couple months later, I guess they had read some of the articles that I was posting, and they said, "Hey, can I help you start a fundraiser?" They did. They helped me put together an online auction to raise money for the Black Bar Applicant Fund. So I just think it was the just the perfect time to be able to share messaging about the truth and for people to be able to actually take it in. Whereas today we're all so busy, and before the pandemic, we're all so busy. People can get stuck in their ways really easily because they don't have the time to read the full article outside of
Mhm.
the headline or
Mhm.
read a book or whatever. So it was so perfect.
Or understand how systems are built against us. Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
built
going
the
through the
process.
yeah, built to a process. I mean, we go through the day to day, like you're saying, there's so many distractions. There's so many ways that, like, at the end of the day, we're all like trying to make a dollar, right? But then we have to understand like how these things have been set up so that we can't do that.
When we come back, we get into the cost of preparing for the bar exam.
There's a quote or a statistic that I found from the ABA profile of the legal profession that said that as of 2024, only about 5% of lawyers in the U.S. are Black, even though Black people make up 13.6% of the population, a number that has barely moved in the past decade. This
Hmm.
goes to your point about what all the bar exam entails. It entails like you have to take off of work, or maybe you can't work. The amount of time you have to study, the cost of things. Can you just give us sort of a picture of the amount of time that it takes to prepare for this type of exam? Also, the cost associated, in addition to what you might already be taking out in terms of student loans. Like, talk to us about
Hmm.
that.
Oh, I have all of that data, but first I want to give you a quote so that you can better understand why what I'm saying was the whole purpose of gatekeeping in the legal profession. So, in 1915, the American Bar Association decided to start implementing the gatekeeping mechanisms. And this is what they said. One way in which an occupation can document its high status is by being able to take its pick of the young people about to enter the labor market and then keep them in school a long time before admitting them to the
Hmm.
charmed circle. Okay, so who can afford after after 3 years, maybe even sometimes 4 years of law school to spend 10 weeks without working? That is suggested. Spend 10 weeks without working, studying for 40 hours each week, just like a traditional 9 to 5. You're studying that amount of time, maybe even more. You still have to pay all of your bills. You still have to eat. You're no longer a student, so you cannot get a student loan. You
Hmm.
have to get a private loan if you need a loan to pay your expenses during that time. On average, it can cost about $15,000 to study for the bar exam because you're paying for a private course. Usually, a commercial bar prep course can cost about $5,000. Um, Sometimes you have study books that can cost up to $600. You might want to have a tutor that could cost
Yeah.
$2,000. And then you have to pay for groceries, maybe childcare, and your living expenses like rent or mortgage, all that for 10 weeks. Um, and at the same time be extremely focused, right? So having kids running around, not a good idea. Or even if your family doesn't quite understand that sitting to study for the bar exam is the last big hump that you need to get over and you need to focus, they might be pressuring you to join them in family gatherings and spend time with them. Or if you have a sick family member, if life just happens,
Right.
you know what I mean? You pretty much have to neglect all that just for the bar exam. And we only have a bar exam twice a year. So if you miss it that one time, you gotta wait another I think it's like 4 or 5 months to take it again,
Yeah.
right? Um, so yeah, there are some law firms that give bar stipends, or even advances to their associates. However, that is very, very rare. Um, and if you don't pass, you might have to pay it back. So yeah, it's really expensive and it takes a really long time. You already have had to go to undergrad for 4 years. Then you had to go to law school for 3 years. Now you need to spend another 10 weeks and $15,000
Yeah.
at least studying for the bar exam.
And after all of that, I can only think of like one or two demographics that would be able to afford or be able to do that.
Yeah.
What after passing this exam, where are people usually working? And like how much money are they truly making coming out right out of law school?
Well, here's the thing. It is a long process. So you have the 10 weeks you're studying, you take the bar exam. You actually don't find out whether or not you pass for another like 3, 4 months. And then you sometimes can't swear in for another month or however long after that. Some people even have to do their character and fitness. So it could take even up to a year and 2 years sometimes to actually get licensed. During that time, you are not treated or paid as an attorney.
Yeah.
And so it depends on where you are in the country, and who you're working for. You have places with low cost of living, like Alabama, where as an associate you get paid maybe like 40,000. That's kind of high. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Not an
Yeah.
associate, but someone who hasn't been licensed. So your pre-licensed pay is going to be, it could be that low. Or you have places like DC and California where the cost of living is higher. Then maybe you could get paid like 70K, while you're waiting to get your your score back and to swear in. Um, and then it could be hard to find a job in the first place. So you could be working at like a grocery store or something, making
Right.
like minimum wage, right? The reality is that more often than not, people are not making enough money to keep up with the cost of living. Um, and they're not going to get lawyer pay until after the license hits. And that takes several months to years.
Is this what your petition was originally for when you were pushing for diploma privilege, was to um, allow people to like a fairer solution for this exam so that in long term, people wouldn't be either in so much debt or have so much trouble getting into the profession in general?
Well, listen, I ultimately, yes, I want it to be fair, but Wisconsin never enacted a bar exam for their in-state graduates. So before all of this, Wisconsin has had people who graduated from law school and immediately became attorneys as soon as they finished their last courses. And you'll hear from a lot of those people. I've seen their comments here and there. I've talked to some of them, and they'll say it was super helpful. They got their career started right away. They can start paying their loans back right away. They can start recovering, financially and building their family even right away. So we have a, a study. We have something to study, um, for years back to see how people fare without taking the bar exam. And I think if you look at Wisconsin and the people who graduate there with diploma privilege, you will see that they have a better career track. a better what do I want to say, like, lifestyle.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? They're able to afford bills and things like that.
Right.
And then also, mentally they haven't had to go through this taxing process. But another thing that I was petitioning for is to not have us do this repetitive exam. We've already passed all the same exams while we were in law school.
Right.
Um, and also, it would be malpractice for an attorney to practice the same way that a bar exam is given. So for the bar exam, you have to pretty much memorize all this material and then just write it all out over the course of 2 days in these time test segments. um when we're practicing, we have to research the cases. We have to research the law, make sure we have the most up-to-date law. It would be malpractice for us to memorize the law and then just practice based off of that. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
And you're not timed. You have time to research something and then write it later on and think and you know what I mean? It takes a lot
Absolutely.
of time and attention to analyze the law and to come up with good arguments. So to expect an attorney to, in um, maybe 2 hours, fix your entire case is no one's expecting that at all. So why would you expect us to solve cases on a piece of paper over the course of 2 days in a few hours?
Yeah, it's very unrealistic. What
It's
kind of
unrealistic.
pushback what kind of pushback or support did you receive as part of this, goal?
Well, I wasn't the only person who was a part of it, so I had the support of everybody who was a part of United for Diploma Privilege. So that was hundreds of us across the nation. And then people who came before us who had already tried to fight this fight. So there is a woman, she's an attorney. Her name is Joan Hallworth, Howarth. If you look her up, she's been talking about bar abolition and bar reform for decades. Um, and so I feel like when we started, we kind of woke up the beast. Now she's touring across the nation right now, reforming the bar, doing her good work that was pretty much stalled for so long. And that was amazing to see. um, because she educated us even more about the work she had been doing and the pushback she had been getting. And so we didn't have to reinvent the wheel when we were coming up with our arguments and things like that. Um, the negative comments, though, they were flooding in. It's like, well, how can you tell someone's a good lawyer if they don't take the bar exam? And what about all these people who graduate from terrible law schools?
Hmm.
You're just gonna let them become attorneys, and even if the bar exam doesn't actually test for competency, you need to put someone through it because they need to go through that test to make sure that they're strong and able to get through it mentally, because practicing law is a mental game and it's hard. Nothing I've encountered during my time practicing law has been as hard on me mentally as the bar exam.
And who were these, opposers?
We had some judges that said some crazy things. we But a lot of them were just like random people on the internet who had never gone to law school and maybe never gone to undergrad themselves. So it's a lot of nobodies, and sometimes some pretty influential people jumped on that bandwagon as well, unfortunately.
Next, the founding of the Black Bar Applicant Fund.
Yeah. Your work didn't stop there, though, with the petition that you worked with hundreds of other attorneys on. You decided to take the next step, which was to launch your nonprofit. I want to talk about sort of that aha moment. Like, what led you to turn your advocacy into a full-fledged nonprofit?
Yeah, so while I was working with Diploma Privilege, there was a lot of people who wanted to give us donations. And our purpose was for advocacy and policy change. I guess the people who really started United for Diploma Privilege, um, the founders were not focused on like keeping it around for forever. So they were like,
Mm,
we don't need donations. We just want to like change the policy now, right? But myself and a few other people who were members of United for Deployment Privilege and fully invested, we were like, well, we could use those donations to help the people who are suffering now, because we knew that the bar exam was expensive and really difficult on people. Um, and so we were like, we need a fund of some sort. We need something to funnel the money to people who actually need it, who are suffering right now while they're
right,
trying to study for the bar exam. And then I was like, well, because of this history of racism, of course I want to help Black people first,
right.
especially. And I thought about the statistics too. You know, we are one of the most underrepresented in the profession. Asian people are close to being fully represented, and um, Hispanic people are in certain areas really represented, and then in other areas of the country not as represented. However, I
Mhm,
could really only speak to my experience.
right.
Now, I am Latina as well, but my lived experience as someone who's constantly being perceived as a Black woman, I know what that struggle is, specifically to constantly have to face oppression. And so I wanted to start my organization to help Black people, and I wanted the donations that were funneling in because of our advocacy and sharing, the history of the racist bar exam. I wanted that to go to Black people. I had other people reach out who said, can we expand it to other demographics? And I'm like, sure, I can show you how to start your organization. It'll just be separate, because I really wanted to highlight the unique struggle of Black Americans. And
Mm,
also it's people of the diaspora in general, um, of the African diaspora. And so, yeah, like that's where it kind of was born. The idea, I put up a link for people to donate. I created a website, and then I found a fiscal sponsor, who helped us with our administration needs and our 501(c) status.
yes.
Um, and that's how we started. And it was, I think, truly a fairy tale beginning. It was
Mm.
kind of like Cinderella with the slipper. It was like the money was available, it was there. It was just like, where do we put it? And I felt like the Black Bar Applicant Fund was the perfect place to put it.
Coming up, the impact the fund has had on its applicants.
I loved hearing your story when we spoke prior. Like, you founded this back in 2021, your 501(c)(3, not having much experience with nonprofits before, but during the time, it seemed that so many people were willing to donate and pour into this fund so that you could achieve this goal of sponsorships and mentorships and just getting people across the finish line of becoming lawyers. And what I thought was really interesting was that you raised $100,000 in your first year and supported over 100 applicants. Like, you founded this back in 2021. How have things changed now, especially when we are in this climate of we're sort of like regressing back with DEI funding being dried up and all these other areas where where again back to oppression. Have you seen that in your organization? Has that affected anything currently?
Yes. So it's affected my approach. I've taken it easy this year as far as fundraising and dispersing funds. I before I make those moves again, I really want to make sure that our organization isn't attacked by the people who are trying to push DEI out of education and other institutions. So now I have to like reorganize smartly. I want to bring more people onto my team that are going to help me make sure that we can grow and be sustainable. Um, but also the we have had a lot of donations this year, consistent donations from people who have always donated, and then sometimes a big random surprise donation. So people still care. It still matters to people. Black lawyers still matter to people, but the vehicle to which we create this change and we support Black people, I feel, has to be stronger moving forward in order to prevent our downfall.
Mm.
Before people say, "Oh, where you're being discriminatory because you have this organization that helps Black people." So I'm working on that, combating this new challenge. But I've been met with so much support from everyone who I speak to about the organization, and then our donors still. Um, our 501(c) did the fiscal sponsor, they did lose funding. They're also a scholarship program, and they mostly help um, people with different immigration statuses and people of color, underrepresented people in college and things like that. And so, like, they were hit as well. They're a way bigger organization than us,
Mm.
and they were making millions in donation, receiving millions in donations. So
Yeah.
um, it's impacting us, my organization and organizations like mine.
How do you talk to us about the ways in which your organization is helping an applicant, and like if you can share a story of a recipient who has passed the bar because of your support?
Okay, so one of my favorite stories was when there was an applicant who had just become a new dad, and um, he had been trying to pay for his bar exam for months. The original due date was in December, and he didn't make it because had spent his money on his child, right? The necessities for his child. And he tried to ask family for money. He tried to fundraise on his own, things like that. It was not working. The next deadline was coming up, and the bar in his jurisdiction had tacked on a $400 penalty for paying late. So now, instead of owing $400, along with that original $400 registration fee, there was another $400. So in total, he needed to pay $800, which made it even more difficult for him to pay. So he called me one night and he was like, "You're the founder of Black Bar Applicant Fund, right?" And I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "Well, um, told me the whole story about how he just had a baby and everything and got the late fee." And he was like, "If I don't take this bar exam and pass, I'm going to lose my post bar job at a law firm." And I was just like, "We got to do something about it." So I got the approval from our fiscal sponsor because they handle all the money. They're in charge of our bank account, all that. So I got their approval to send this applicant emergency fund. Well, actually, I didn't send him funds. I logged on to his bar account where he's supposed to register, and entered the payment information and registered him to take the bar. He was able to sit for the bar and keep his job.
That's
Yep,
incredible. That's
and
incredible.
raise his family. Yep.
And these are the stories of how much of an impact you're making with your fund. And I'm just so happy that the listeners can hear that to not only support but people who need this help. It's hard sometimes to know where to go to find the funding, and that there still are organizations out there that can help. So I love that story. I have a few more questions for you, and just the bigger picture and the bigger scope of this and why it's so important. But like, what policy changes or reforms do you want to see at the state or the national level?
Um, I've always thought about this. Like since I worked for United for Diploma Privilege and started the fund, I'm like, is this going to end up being a state issue or a national issue? I think it has to be both. We have what's called the National Conference of Bar Examiners, excuse me, NCBE. They issue a uniform bar exam to multiple jurisdictions that have opted into their bar exam. And so they're very influential in administering the bar exam. I call them, they're part of the bar mafia. All of these organizations that are just making money, profit from administering the bar exam, I call them the bar mafia. So nationally, I would like to see organizations like this. I want to see them be regulated more,
Okay.
in a sense that like, are you all pushing for this for profit or because it's absolutely necessary?
Mm,
I think that maybe even a study, something, because I know it will show that pretty much everything they're doing is for profit and it's not because they think it's going to make our legal profession better, right?
yeah.
Ultimately, I want each jurisdiction to opt out of the bar exam. I want every state to say, no, we're not going to grant a bar exam anymore because the shame of all of this is that you can graduate from law school and pass the bar exam and never have stepped foot in a courtroom, never talk to a judge, never talk to a practicing attorney unless they were one of your law school professors, never helped work on any cases because internships for the most part are not required for every law school graduate,
Wow.
right? That's not a requirement, but taking the bar exam is. That is very scary. I want my attorney to have encountered some sort of real life
Real
legal
life
issue
experience. Yeah.
and help someone under the supervision of an experienced attorney or professor before they work on my case. And you just cannot guarantee that that's the case now because people can graduate law school and take the bar exam and not have practiced law at all in any capacity. And so I want states to opt out of the bar exam and opt into practical experience. Pay law students to take internships. No more free internships, free labor. Um, and offer them the opportunity to showcase their work in portfolios. Showcase how they've been able to research and how they've been able to write a brief, um, and their success or maybe even failure. Because if you didn't win the case, what did you learn? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's a real shame that we're putting such a big emphasis on the bar exam and not on real life practice. And I want each jurisdiction to opt out, to abolish the bar exam and implement diploma privilege as well as real experience like internships while you're in school that you get paid for.
How do we make the profession more financially accessible?
Great question. So getting rid of the bar exam will be a good mechanism,
Yeah,
but
start. Yeah.
surprisingly, yeah, it's a good start. Surprisingly, I think we actually need to get rid of the requirement that we go to undergrad before law school.
Hmm.
I think that law school can be a sufficient amount of schooling. Um, some people may opt to go to undergrad anyway because they may have other interests, but for the
Right.
most part, people like me who knew they wanted to be a lawyer when they were 8 years old would
Yeah.
graduate high school and then enter into law school, maybe even have a more rigorous, studies while they're in law school, tack on one more year for liberal arts education portion or
Some gen
whatever.
eds. Yeah.
Exactly. but for the most part, we take off that huge bill of undergrad, have law school as the only requirement, as well as the internships. And then on top of that, we make sure more law schools are accredited. Right now, we have an exclusive set of law schools that are accredited by the ABA, and
Mhm.
that allows the price tag to just go up outrageously. You know what I mean? When you have what we call in our profession the T14, the top 14 schools that everyone wants to go to, you create a huge bill for a huge price tag for law schools. But I know good and well you can get a very good education at a school that is not a top 14, right?
Yeah.
Um, and California still has these non-ABA accredited schools. Um, and people like to talk about them a lot, but honestly, if you look at history, these non-ABA accredited schools and other non-ABA accredited schools were the home for people of color and poor people. And the reason the ABA added all of these really harsh accreditation requirements is because they wanted to, gatekeep and limit
Gatekeep.
who can join the profession. And so we need to get back to understanding that our profession shouldn't be something that should be exclusive, in the sense that if you're poor, you can't be a lawyer. It should be affordable and it should be accessible. And
Yes.
I think that's the very least that we could ask for.
Yeah. No, I agree. I want to use this time as like a call to action, like for the listeners that are listening to this and how they can support your work. Like, tell us, how can people support your mission that are listening to this episode today?
The number one thing is to donate to the Black Bar Applicant Fund. Go to blackbarapplicantfund.org. A donation of $500 could help to give one emergency scholarship to someone, but up to $2,000 can help us pay for a bar study course for someone. So donate today. And even if you can only afford to give $10, donate. Set up reoccurring payments. That money helps us directly fund someone's bar study. Um, but then it also helps us to propel our mission to change the bar exam, to abolish it and change the profession so that it is accessible for people, which will in turn allow us to see more people of color
Yes.
represented in the legal profession, and also more affordable attorneys. Who
No,
doesn't want that?
100%.
Who does not want to be able to have access to an attorney that they could actually pay for?
You are dismantling a system. You're taking on a huge task, but there has to be someone that does it. And so I really appreciate you coming onto the show to give us all an education, but really give us an understanding of not just going with the flow. Like, really, everyone needs to know their laws. Everyone needs to know the gatekeeping, the things that are being gatekept in any industry. I think the pandemic was the perfect time for these things to come to light, but the fight is not over. And so not only can people be supported by your organization, but we can all do our part, no matter if we are lawyers or not, to make this a more representation, a better representation of our people. So thank you for coming on the show. If you have anything else you would love to add, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, so follow me on Instagram. I'm at Attorney Carson. Follow the Black Bar Applicant Fund on Instagram and Twitter at Black Bar App Fund. And look out for a book that I am writing about segregation in the legal profession. That is going to come in the next year, and I'm so excited to publish it and to spread the word.
Yes, and we would love to have you back too to promote that book and just learn more about what you're doing for the community. So thank you. Well, I
Thank
can't
you
wait
so
for you to
much.
return. Yes.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of A Bright Idea Podcast. Today's guest was Octavia Carson with the Black Bar Applicant Fund. To learn more, visit www.blackbarapplicantfund.org or email support@blackbarapplicantfund.org. You can also follow her on social media at Black Bar Applicant Fund. Every donation helps a future lawyer cross the finish line. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us bring on more stories like Octavia's. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at A Bright Idea Podcast for updates. And if there's a topic or a guest you'd like to hear from next, drop us a message. If you would like to support our show directly, you can donate to our Cash App at A Bright Idea Podcast. This show was edited by myself, and all social media was handled by my social media manager, Shekinah Henderson. Until next time, I'm Amber Key.